You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Glenn, all eyes have been on New York, where Donald Trump was trying to get his conviction, awaiting sentencing, thrown out entirely. That's not exactly what just happened in the courtroom. Can you give an update on this surprise decision handed down by Judge Merchan?
Yeah, Brian, here's something I don't get to say all that often. We have good news on the legal development front regarding one of Donald Trump's criminal cases, and that is because Judge Merchan just refused to throw the case out. Donald Trump's 34 felony guilty verdicts, refused to throw it out on the basis of presidential immunity. So if we back up, when Donald Trump was tried for these 34 felony crimes, falsifying business records, to cover up the true nature of hush money payments, to cheat in the 2016 presidential election, when that trial played out in that criminal courtroom in New York, the Supreme Court had not yet ruled that presidential immunity was a thing. After the jury found Donald Trump guilty 34 times over, the Supreme Court handed down the ruling saying, you know what? We think it's a good idea for American presidents to have a healthy dose of immunity against prosecution for all kinds of crimes they commit against the American people, unless what they did constituted private conduct, not the official conduct of a president of the United States. Now, interestingly, most of Donald Trump's criminal conduct in the New York case was before he was even sworn in as president. So, we were all kind of sensing that Judge Merchan would say, wait a minute, presidential immunity doesn't apply to somebody who commits crimes before they're even sworn in as president,
Right.
Which is, it almost speaks for itself, that position. However, Donald Trump did do some things to continue his criminal conduct after he was elected, like writing reimbursement checks out of the Oval Office to his co-conspirator, Michael Cohen, to reimburse Cohen, because Cohen is the one who actually made the hush money payments at the direction of and for the benefit of Donald Trump. Here is what Judge Merchan just ruled. He said, you know what? I find that what Donald Trump did was not official presidential conduct. However, he said, I acknowledge that there might be a thing he did here or there while he was president that maybe some people could view as official presidential conduct. If that is the case, I find that there was such a mountain of evidence, incriminating evidence against Donald Trump that clearly was not official conduct of a president, that any admission of bits and pieces of evidence that unfolded while he was president was, and here's the magic word in the criminal law, harmless error. What does that mean? Brian, take it from this old career prosecutor who spent 30 years inside courtrooms prosecuting cases. Mistakes are made in every criminal trial. I've made them, judges make them, defense attorneys make them, witnesses make them, officers make them, jurors make them. Trials are human endeavors. Mistakes are made in virtually every criminal trial. That's why there's an entire body of law that says if a mistake that was made during the course of the trial didn't really impact the outcome of the case, then the judges can deem it harmless error, and they can reject the relief sought by a party, like throwing out the case. Harmless error is something that sort of takes place in case after case after case after case. Judge Merchan said if there was any error, and he didn't concede that there was, it was harmless. Therefore, he refused to throw out Donald Trump's 34 guilty verdicts, and the case now is at least continuing to move in the direction of sentencing.
Well, Glenn, elephant in the room here, Trump is also trying to have this case thrown out just by virtue of the fact that he is now the president-elect. So what did Judge Merchan say on that question?
He said nothing, not yet. He hasn't ruled on that one. However, there were very compelling briefs filed by the prosecutors in this case, not to mention by Letitia James in the civil fraud case. They both said, guess what? President-elect immunity is not a thing,
Right.
Does not exist. The Supreme Court has not said there is such a thing as president-elect immunity, only presidential immunity. So here's where we stand, and to kind of project where I think this is headed. I think Judge Merchan will also refuse to throw the case out based on president-elect immunity. And remember, Alvin Bragg's prosecutors filed a motion a few days ago saying, look, Judge, you have two options. Because there's no such thing as president-elect immunity, you can either proceed to sentencing right now, and you'll probably have to sentence Trump to a probationary term. Why? Well, because I don't think anybody expects Judge Merchan to give Donald Trump 6 months or a year in jail now that he is about to be sworn in as president on January 20th. So the prosecutor said, either sentence him now, and you can give him a probationary sentence. The good news would be that would cement the conviction. It would be over and done, and he would forever be a convicted felon. Or just pause the case right now, Judge, stay it, freeze it, and then the minute Donald Trump leaves office, he can be sentenced on his 34 felony guilty verdicts, and he can be sent to prison for 6 months, a year, or more. Those are the two options, as the prosecutors see it, that Judge Merchan has. But here's the other thing, not to bury the lead, even though it is already buried, because we've been talking for quite a few minutes. The other thing that I expect to see, Brian, as early as tomorrow or in the coming days, is for Donald Trump's lawyers to file an immediate appeal of today's ruling by Judge Merchan saying, no, you don't have presidential immunity. I won't throw out your guilty verdicts. Because when a judge makes a ruling on an immunity issue, that is typically immediately appealable. So I have a feeling, give Trump's lawyers 24 or 48 hours. We're going to see an appeal of today's refusal to throw out the case by Judge Merchan.
And of course, this is in the state court system, and even if it works its way up the state court system, there is the likelihood that Trump will try to have this thing hop into the federal court system, which would, of course, give the Supreme Court the ability, if they decide to take it, to weigh in on this as the final arbiters of this question. And as they've done in the past, they're usually more deferential than not to Donald Trump. Glenn, one quick question about the prospect of Trump getting probation. Does it not seem like a big waste of time to have gone through this whole process to then give somebody who is the soon-to-be president of the United States probation, as if that's going to limit him in any way whatsoever? Isn't that just effectively akin to having no sentence at all if they choose to give somebody probation for whom that doesn't even matter and there won't be anybody to enforce any of it?
It sure does make the entire endeavor feel like a waste of time. Now, listen, I would rather have a felony conviction on Donald Trump's permanent record, so, he might have a trouble in a job interview in the future.
Right.
Listen, I'd rather have that than nothing, because that will be at least some deterrent value for others who are maybe contemplating cheating in American elections. But you know what? It's no kind of punishment to sentence somebody who's been found guilty by a jury of his peers of 34 felony crimes to probation or even to home detention, right? That's no kind of punishment. So it would be, talk about anticlimactic. It really would do a disservice to the prosecutors, to the grand jurors, to the trial jurors, and most importantly, to the people of New York who Donald Trump, defrauded. He violated the laws of New York 34 times over to try to cheat in and steal a presidential election. And if ever there were crimes that deserved more punishment than probation, just sort of a walk, it would be these crimes.
If I had to predict what I think is likely going to happen, I would say that probation is probably more likely than the prospect of this whole thing getting put on pause and then getting taken up again in 4 years if and when Donald Trump is out of office, only because I think that first of all, the likelihood that we're going to see some true justice for somebody like Trump, I think, is escaping, along with the rest of the accountability that he's managed to evade thus far. But also, I think for the judge to put himself, Judge Merchan, basically position himself as as a pariah for the next 4 years as the prospect of a sentence looms over Trump's head is probably too much to ask any judge to deal with, especially knowing full well the way that Donald Trump's supporters will act on his behalf. And so $10 in my predictions will get you a foot long at Subway. But if I had to guess, that's what I would presume is going to happen. I'm not sure if you would agree with me or not.
Yeah, sadly, Brian, I tend to agree with you. But the one thing I will say, and that is, I think probation is more likely than trying to pause the case for 4 years and sentence Trump when he leaves office. But here's the thing. You say Judge Merchan may not want to make himself a pariah and kind of have this case hanging over Trump's head and have Judge Merchan suffer harassment from Trump supporters for the next 4 years. But you know what? You can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. You can't take making the difficult calls as a judge and take off the damn black robe and find another line of work. And it is because, and this is not a criticism of Judge Merchan, because I don't know what position he'll take, but it is because we are forever finding reasons to decline to do the hard thing and holding Donald Trump accountable for his crimes. That is part of why we find ourselves where we do, with a person who's about to retake the reins of governmental power, who is an abject criminal and has run roughshod over both the rule of law and the American people. We need more folks to step up, stand up, and stay strong.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And it's not just that lawlessness begets more lawlessness, but our justice system's refusal to actually hold these people to account is also what encourages more of this corrupt behavior to continue on and on and on. And we're seeing that on full display right now. And yet, for some reason, nobody wants to step up, whether it's folks in the justice system itself, whether it's folks in the media who continue to obey in advance, from Joe and Mika to Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, ABC, laying down their sword and settling in a $15 million defamation lawsuit that they absolutely could have won, and on, which, hopefully underscores the importance of the work that Glenn and I are doing here with the Legal Breakdown. So if you want to support us, especially as we enter this period where we're seeing so many media outlets and figures in the legal system kind of refuse to meet the moment with the urgency that it deserves, please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channels. The links to both of our channels are right here on this screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching the Legal Breakdown.